Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Manna Church. Hi, guys. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty there trying to get this thing started, but we are up and running. It is Wednesday night, 7:30. You know what that means? It is time for Bible study. Excuse me. And I am looking forward to it. Got a neat one for you guys here tonight. Actually, a new one. We're going to be starting a little bit of a new topic that's going to reach into our hidden manas, into our Shabbat services. And it's a really big topic. We're going to be talking about Israel in all sorts of different ways and angles. But so tonight be a little bit of an introduction on that. Of course, before I do all of that stuff, I want to remind everybody, if you are checking us out here for the first time as part of Bible study, please give us a shout out online. Let us know where you are watching from. And also, if you enjoy the message, give us a thumbs up, a like, a share it out. Don't forget to subscribe if you can. Hit that subscribe button and the bell. You'll be notified each time that we go live. You can also check us out at Living Manna, LM. If you go to the Google Play Store or the App Store, you can download our app. You can watch us on the app, all sorts of other materials and things that we have there on the app. And of course, Passover is coming up real quick. You can sign up for Passover. All the feast days. Feast days are literally right around the corner. Lots of great stuff going on. So you can do that right through the LM app. And if you feel like supporting us, you can do that as well through the LM app. All right. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into this thing for tonight. We got a neat Bible study, guys. Tonight's study. Hold on a second here. Here we go. Tonight's study is entitled, "What is the New Covenant?" Now, I know it seems a little elementary, right? Because obviously, we're in the new covenant. We've been living out the new covenant. But it really is pertinent to beginning to talk about Israel. Of course, when we say Israel today, we're talking about the country that's in the Middle East. And what is their place in all of this? How can we know or have at least an idea, or should we know, should we have an idea of where we are in this great timeline? Well, I think we can. I think we should. I think if we really, really understand what the stories and the prophecies of the Bible are all about, we should be looking at things that are happening right now all around us in great, great amazement and anticipation that we are a lot closer. One, because there is an Israel in the land. And I know there's all sorts of different ideas and concepts. We're going to get into all of that. Everybody always has an opinion about something concerning Israel. We'll get into some of those things, maybe more on a hidden manner with Brother Max. But I want to make sure that we understand what the story of the new covenant is actually about. Now, there's a lot of stories to it. There's a lot of different angles on it, a lot of different threads that go through it. But in general, what is the new covenant? So that's where we're going to start for tonight. Let's open up with a word of prayer and jump right into this. Abba, we love you. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts that are willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen. Okay, so let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you all can see it if you're watching us on Roku. And if you haven't checked it out yet, we're on Spotify in the mornings as well. Of course, most people have the Manna app. But if you have Spotify, you're in your car, you can go right to Spotify, look up Morning Manna on your search engine there on Spotify, and you'll get each one of our daily morning mannas will be there as well. So you can listen to it in the car, you can listen to it at work or on the bus, wherever it is you happen to be, on all sorts of different platforms. But the new thing that we're doing here is Spotify in the morning. So check that out if you can. So what is the new covenant, right? Obviously, you see the picture there. There's the flat bread that's there. You got the unleavened bread, and of course, you've got the cup there. You think about the new covenant, of course, we're thinking about that night that the master makes this toast, that he opens the bread, says, "This is my body, and this is the blood of the covenant, of the new covenant." See, and I think that's a little bit of the issue, because we are just so used to saying new covenant, when in reality, what it is a renewed covenant. And I know you say, well, that's just splitting hairs. Well, it's not. It's actually very, very important to understanding the story. So that's what I want us to do today. I want us to understand the story. So this is just a little chart. Very, very simple. There's all sorts. I'm sure there are all sorts of nuances that could be added into this. But as a general concept today, when we are talking about people who have a faith in Messiah, we're talking about, or at least the term most of us use is church, or has been used, is church. We are part of the church, and there's many, many denominations, names, all sorts of, all over the world, all with different traditions and customs, etc., etc., etc. But as a general note, I think across the board, from Catholicism to Protestantism to you name it, the idea that the church has, at least this is what we were taught, this is what I came into contact with, is that there is a difference between Israel and what Father is doing with the Jews, what the whole Torah and the prophets are about, as opposed to what Abba is doing now with the church. And we use that word church. We've defined that before. We know the word just means congregation, assembly, but it's taken on a whole new meaning today to mean, of course, and you can see it up on your notes there, we take it to mean Gentile church. And so basically this chart is just showing that the concept, the idea, and I actually saw a video, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't want to call the guy's name out. I actually really like him. I like listening to him. He does a lot of work with Muslims. I see him debating Muslims all the time, but I see him also debating other Christians and stuff too. But I'd say the majority of the stuff that he does is with Muslims, and he's really good. I mean, the guy knows, the guy is able to, I mean, just quote scripture, just find scripture where it is, just right off his head. And well, that's great to do that. I can't always do that. I can't remember generally where it is, but this guy has, just book and verse, just sort of memorized, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I've seen him, go at it with Muslims. And the thing is, he knows the Quran too, backwards and forwards. And he's always making the case for Messiah against Islam. And like I said, I loved a lot of the stuff that he does. It's really, really interesting to listen to as he goes back and forth with them. But I heard him talking to a Christian woman. And he said to her, do you think that the Jewish people are still God's chosen people? And she says, well, of course, they're there, they're in the Middle East, and, they're the descendants of, and he made a covenant with them. And he said to her actually to turn to this verse, which comes out of Matthew chapter 21. You can see it down there on your, on the screen. And this is part of the parable of the vineyard. Of course, the man plants a vineyard, puts a wine press in it, puts, a tower in it, a wall around it. Of course, he's really talking about Jerusalem. He's talking about the temple, and he lends it out to people so that they bring the fruit of it when the master sends his servants. Of course, he sends multiple servants. They don't bring the fruit. He sends other servants. They kill them. Finally says, I'm going to send my son. He sends the son, and they kill the son to get the son's inheritance. Okay. So after that whole story, the master poses the question to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the priests that are standing there listening to this story. And he says, so what should the owner of this vineyard do to those men who killed his son? And so here's what they say. Here's verse 41. It says, they said to him, evil ones, he shall bring them to evil destruction. This is what they're saying should be done to these people. Bring them to evil destruction, and lease the vineyard to other farmers, who shall give him their fruits in their seasons. All right, so he should just wipe them out and start all over with somebody else. Verse 42 says, Yeshua said to them, did you ever read the scripture? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was from Yahuwah, and it is marvelous in our eyes. So he's saying that the thing that is going to be rejected is going to be the center of everything, meaning, of course, himself. And then verse 43, he says, because of this, I say to you, the kingdom of Elohim shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits of it. So he said to the woman, see, he took the kingdom away from Israel. He took the kingdom away from the Jews, and he's given it to another kingdom. But the kingdom he was referring to is he's given it to the Gentiles, to the Gentile church. That this is not about Israel anymore. They're not a chosen people. They're not a covenant people. They reject the Messiah, and that's it. This has nothing to do with them. This is about the Gentile church. And that concept, that idea that he proposed is again very, very common. The idea that what Father started off with the Jews, or the Israel of the first century, that kingdom is taken from them and is given to the Gentiles, another nation, and that other nation is now under not the old covenant, but it is under a new covenant, totally replacing the prior covenant. And now it's not a covenant based on Torah or law any longer. It is a covenant based on grace and mercy. This is the general idea, the general thinking. Like I said, I'm sure there's nuances in all sorts of different groups. And I've even heard some of our Hebrew roots brethren sort of really kind of poo-poo the idea of the Jews that are there in the Middle East. Are they Jews? Are they European colonizers? And we'll get into that later when maybe at a Hidden Manna we'll talk a little bit about that, the history of it and what's going on. But ultimately, is it important that they're there? I think yes. I think absolutely it's important. But I also think we've lost part of the story, because if you were to ask most people, and by most people I mean most people in the church, the Gentile church as it's called today, what's the story of the new covenant about? They would tell you, well, the story of the new covenant is that Father sent his only begotten Son because he loved the whole world, to die for us, to die for our sins, and resurrect to give eternal life to everyone who believes in him. And that's true. There's absolute truth in that. There's no doubt that is true. But, and I know this may sound crazy, that's only part of the story. That's only part of the story. There's something else to the idea of a new covenant that cannot be ignored, and has been ignored for a long, long time. And it is the thing that actually makes the story or helps the story to make sense. Here is Matthew chapter 22. This is, at least by my humble estimation, one of the most important verses that the Master says, because what he does is he defines what the story of the Bible, not just the covenant, but what the Bible is about. Of course, this is the parable of the wedding. And it says, verses like, I don't know, 1 through 3. He says, and Yahushua and Messiah responded and spoke to them again by parables, and said, the kingdom or the reign of the heavens is like a man, a sovereign, who made a wedding feast for his son, and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. So think about this a second. Here's the Master giving us a synopsis. What's the whole story about? The kingdom is about a father who has a son, and he's having a wedding for his son. That's it. Now, I know there's a lot more to the story, obviously, but in general terms, this is the core of the story. This is what the whole thing's about. The covenant that we are speaking about is a marriage covenant. That's what this is about. The reason for a covenant is to establish a marriage. And this connects all the way to the end of the book, this idea that the covenant is about a marriage, that the whole story's been about a marriage. And I know this probably isn't new to you if you've been listening to anything we've talked about for a while. But here's Revelation 19. So here's the end of the story. And what's the end of the story about? Well, it's about what the whole story's been about. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 7 says, let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise. For the marriage of the Lamb, the Son, has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright. For the fine linen is the righteousness of the set apart ones. And he said to me, write, blessed are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of Elohim. So what is the new covenant? It's a wedding covenant. I mean, in its most basic and simple terms, it's a marriage covenant. No different than, well, obviously different, but in like fashion to any time any one of us decides to get married, we get together, we make a covenant, promises to one another, vows to one another, and husband and wife become one. That's what this story is. That's the purpose of the wedding covenant. The renewed covenant, or as is more probably spoken of more often, the new covenant. But here's my question. Because in all of these stories, even this one here, it's about the guests. It's about sending out the invitations. The wedding feast is planned. But who's the bride? Now, the response from Christendom today would be, well, we are, meaning the churches, the Gentile church is the bride of Messiah. Except there's a much bigger part to this story than just that. That's a little self-centered and a bit ignorant of what the entire story is. As it is to say, did Father just throw away one group of people and that's it? He's done with them, and now he's moving on to some other group, which again is sort of what this woman was told on this video that I was watching. And she sat there, she thought about it for a second, and she just went right along with it. And I'm thinking there saying, no. Of course, I'm just talking to the TV screen, so that doesn't do anything, or the iPad screen, that doesn't do anything. So who's the bride? That's the question. Who's the bride? Again, most of us would think or say, well, the church. We're the bride. So I want to tell you a story, right? I want to go through the story and sort of tell you a story to at least get us all on the same page before we go further in Friday night and Saturday morning in trying to explain the position of why there's an Israel in the Middle East today, why there are Jews in the Middle East today. What is their position? Why are they there? Is that something we should be looking at and noticing? Is this prophecy that's happening in front of us? Why are we here today? Who are we if we are not the Gentile church, this other nation that he's talking about? Well, again, like everything else, we've got to go back to the Torah. Everything in the scripture, I've always said this, is cyclical. Excuse me, guys. But it's more than cyclical. Everything is more than just cyclical. History, biblical history, is Bible prophecy. And that's maybe a little bit fancier way of saying everything's cyclical. But all of the history that we read of, Father in his will and Messiah through his actions has allowed history to play out in such a way that it tells us a story also of what's coming. And he says this multiple times, I tell you the ending from the beginning, right out of the book of Isaiah. And he does. That's being cyclical. So there's a story in history we have to know and recognize and be sensitive to, and then to be able to look at it as prophecy and realize what's going on now is the fulfillment, almost the reenactment sometimes, of what already did happen. So let's talk about the first wedding covenant, because there's a first wedding covenant. Remember, the wedding covenant we're familiar with is the renewed wedding covenant or new wedding covenant. The first wedding covenant was with Israel. And by Israel, we mean the children of Jacob. Jacob has his 12 sons and his daughter. And they're in Egypt, and they multiply in Egypt, and they go from being these, this little clan of people to being a small nation. And of course, through Moses, they get taken out of Egypt. Sorry, guys. They get taken out of Egypt through the hand of Moses, obviously through the Passover, right? So that story gets that, even though that's biblical history, that's also prophecy. It's going to tell us something later on. So finally, they get out of Egypt. They get to go through the Red Sea. All of that happens, and they get to Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 19. And here's just a small portion of it. This is the actual, I guess you could call this the wedding ceremony. This is the exchanging of vows. Exodus chapter 19, verse 3. It says, and Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yah called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say. This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob. So we say the house of Israel, we're also referring to the house of Jacob. Grab something there. It's synonymous. They mean the same thing. The house of Israel is the 12 sons and all the progenitors that come from the 12 sons, eventually the 12 tribes, the house of Jacob. So say this to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel. So you see that they're synonymous, the 12 tribes. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession. I put the PDP in there. You, what is my most treasured possession? My wife. Now, it's not like I own her, but she's mine. I'm hers. She's my most treasured possession. That's what Messiah is saying to Israel here. You are my most treasured possession, my wife, above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a reign, a kingdom of priests, and set apart nation. These are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. So he's calling them out to become or to be one nation, one bride. Father is betrothing his son to the one bride. Messiah is the one marrying or being betrothed to the house of Israel here. And of course, here's the response of the bride. Verse 8. And all the people, being the house of Jacob, the 12 tribes, answered and said together, all that Yahuwah has spoken, we shall do. So Moses brought back the words of the people to Yah. That's it. This is the first wedding covenant, or this is the wedding covenant. This bride is above all peoples on the earth. This is his treasured possession, consisting of the 12 tribes of Israel and all the people that were with them, all those sojourners and foreigners and everybody that came out of Egypt, all make up the house of Israel. So who's the bride? Well, Israel is the one nation. She is the bride. That's what we are learning here. This is the story that we are given. She is the prized possession. All right, so with that then, let's take a look at this. It winds up that even though they, in their vows, say we will do everything that our husband has asked of us to do, we know the story, they don't. They mess up lots and lots and lots and lots of times. And it eventually winds up, and I'm just sort of going through a little bit of the story. I didn't want to go through all sorts of verses on this, but just the story content. Eventually, the one nation splits up into two nations. 10 nations to the north wind up being called Israel. 10 nations to the two nations, not 10 nations, 10 tribes to the north, making up one nation called Israel, whose capital is Samaria. 3 tribes, because even though the priests don't have a stake in the land, they're still there because the temple is there in Judah, whose capital is Jerusalem. So the one nation, the one bride, who was married to Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, that is to Messiah, on the Mount Sinai, the covenant, the marriage covenant that was made with one nation, a prized possession, even though the whole world is his, over all other nations, all other people. And yet they wind up splitting up eventually. And when they split up, the northern kingdom becomes incredibly idolatrous, incredibly adulterous, incredibly rebellious. They just turn away from Father, the whole worship of Baal, just all sorts of horrible things they do in defiance of the wedding covenant. The lower kingdom also does some really, really bad stuff. Not quite as bad as her sister, because now they're called sisters. And so the language changes a little bit. It doesn't mean that Father has 2 separate brides. He sees them as one nation, but for all intents and purposes, the one nation is split into 2, so now he refers to them as 2 sisters. There is the northern house sister, and there is the southern house sister. Ohala and Oholibah is the way it's described in the book of Ezekiel. So it winds up that the northern kingdom is just so bad, so wicked. That sister, who's part of the bride, the children of the bride, is just so bad, Father has no choice but to divorce her. But he poses this question in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 1. I put it in green there so it pops out at you guys. It says, Elohim said, if a man puts away his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's, does he return to her again? Would not the land be made greatly unclean? But you have committed whoring with many lovers. And would you return to me, declares Yahuwah? So he's actually Jeremiah, or really the master speaking through Jeremiah, is actually quoting, I think it's Deuteronomy 24. I got it in another slide there, but I think it's Deuteronomy 24, like verses 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. This is Torah. This is the Torah instruction about what to do when you have an adulterous wife. If she leaves and she is with some other person and she wants to come back, do you take her back? He says, no, you don't. The land will be unclean. She's unclean. She's been with another. You don't take her back. This is the Torah. And so he's posing the question of if this is the Torah of marriage and the northern house has been this idolatrous, this adulterous, and even though Messiah has asked them to return, to forgive, to come back, and they wouldn't, what is he to do? It goes on to say in verse 6, and Yah said to me in the days of Yeshayahu, the sovereign, have you seen what backsliding Israel, now that's the northern kingdom, the northern nation, because now they're two, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there committed whoring. And after she had done all of these, I said, return to me. But she did not return. So this wife, this bride of the covenant, has committed adultery so many times and enjoys what she's doing. She does not want to come back to her husband. And at this point in Jeremiah 3:1, he's posing the question, can I even take her back now? She's been with another. So verse 7, the next verse goes on to say, verse 7 says, and after she had done all of this, meaning the northern house, I said, return to me, but she did not. And her treacherous sister Judah, the southern kingdom, the other nation, she saw it. And I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel, the north, had committed adultery, look what the master has to do. Yah says, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. This is coming right out of Deuteronomy, like I said, 24. Yet, her treacherous sister, Judah, did not fear, but went and committed whoring too. So he's going to deal with her too later on, but she's more faithful than her older sister. Now, we're speaking about them as sisters because since the nations split, they're referred to as two different nations, the northern house and the southern house. So I know it's kind of weird for us to think about, but the master had to divorce his bride, more than half of his bride, the whole northern house, the 10 tribes, also known as the house of Ephraim, or the nation of Ephraim. Ephraim's the biggest tribe there, and so very often Israel is referred to also as Ephraim or Ephraim. Okay, so we're just getting some storyline here. All right, so things haven't gone well. Here is right out of Jeremiah. Things just are not good. The story goes on. Father, absolutely, through the son, in making a marriage for his son now has to give a decree of divorce to the northern house. Well, here's the actual decree. It comes in the book of Hosea. What the master does, what Yah does, is he gets a prophet named Hosea, and he has Hosea marry a woman of whoring, that he, in his life, would live out what it is that the master has lived out with the house of Israel, who is his treasured possession above all peoples, that he has married himself to, betrothed himself to. So here's Hosea, the declaration of the actual divorce decree. It says, the beginning of the word of Yah with Hosea. And Yah said to Hosea, go take yourself a woman of whoring and children of whoring. He said, go have children with her. For the land has utterly whored away from Yah. So he went and he took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. And she conceived and she bore him a son. So what's going to wind up happening is every one of the children that Hosea has are going to be named something specific that are prophetic as to what Father's going to do to both the northern and the southern kingdom for all the stuff they've done. But it's a decree of divorce for the northern kingdom, because look what he says about the northern kingdom. So she has a son, verse 4. I'm right here, guys. I'll use green here. I'm on verse 4. It says, and Yah said to him, call his name Yisrael. Now, it depends on what version you might have. Some of the more modern versions would say Jezreel, but it's Israel, Yizreel, or like I said, you might have Jezreel. That word means scattered. What he's going to do to the northern house is to scatter them. And he's telling us this as the divorce decree by the children that Hosea has. For in a little while I shall revenge the bloodshed of Yezreel on the house of Yehu, and put an end to the reign of the house of Israel. So he's telling us what's going to happen to the nation of Israel. He's going to disband it. He's going to Jezreel it. He's going to scatter it everywhere amongst the Gentile nations. Verse 5, I'm right here, guys. Verse 5, it says, and it shall be in that day that I shall break the bow of Israel in the valley of scattering Jezreel. So he's gonna break Israel by scattering her all over the place. This is the divorce decree. Verse 6, and so Gomer conceives again, and she bore a daughter. And he said to him, call her name Lo Ruhamah, for no longer do I have compassion on the house of Israel. Her name means I have no compassion. So it's crazy that this is a prophet. Every one of his children are a prophecy of what's going to happen to the northern house. So he's going to scatter them in Yezreel, and in Lo Ruhamah, he is going to have no compassion on them. And they're going to wind up getting wiped out and killed and taken prisoner and scattered amongst all the nations. He says, for no longer do I have compassion on the house of Israel, so as to forgive them at all. Because he's tried doing that to call them back. We just read that in Jeremiah, and they wouldn't come. So verse 7, but on Judah, this is real important, listen to this, but I shall have compassion on the house of Judah and save them by Yah, their Elohim. Even though she's been an adulterous person too, even though she's done all sorts of crazy stuff too, she still has enough of a heart to keep coming back, maybe in pretense at times, but she comes back. What's Father going to do with Judah? That's not getting done with the northern house. He says, I'm going to have compassion on her, and I'm going to save them by Yahuwah, their Elohim, and not save them by a bow or a sword or a battle or horses or horsemen. Something else is coming. Some other salvation is coming, which is really what the name Hosea means salvation. All right, so the narrative goes on from here. Let's take a look at it. Here's the next verse, verse 8. And she weaned Lo Ruhamah and conceived and bore a son. So now the third child. Then he said, call his name Lo Ami. For you, meaning Ephraim, Israel, the northern nation, are not my people. That's what Lo Ami means. You're not my people. You are not my people, and I am not for you. This is the husband speaking to the bride. Of course, it's two sisters now. He's speaking to the northern part of the bride. And he's saying, you are scattered. I have no compassion on you. And you are not my people. This is a divorce decree. This is a bad one. I mean, as far as divorce decrees go, there's no good ones. But this is a bad one. I mean, everything that you could think of is going to happen. And this happens over time. It doesn't just happen in one instance. He uses Assyria, comes in, and over time just chews them up and chews them up and chews them up and chews them up until they're finally just utterly destroyed, and almost takes over Judah as well. But like Father says, he saves them. Okay, so lo ami, for you are not my people, and I am not for you. Verse 10 says, yet, despite these three children's names, despite what Father is going through the Son is going to do to the whole northern house of Israel, the bride, yet the number of the children of Israel, the northern house, shall be as the sand of the sea. Where? Among the nations. She's going to be scattered into the Gentile nations all over the Middle East, all the way up to the Caucasus, all the way up into Europe. She's going to be scattered everywhere. Her descendants are going to be. She's going to be intermixed. She's going to be melded into the Gentile nations, and have so many seed that she will be like the sand of the sea, which is not measured or counted. Lots and lots of children over how many thousand years it's been. And it shall be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. They, this scattered, not my people, no compassion, recipients of a divorce decree, yet somehow, this is what's going to happen. Where it said, you are not my people, they shall be called, you are sons of the living El. How's that going to happen? How could that happen? If they are given a divorce decree according to the Torah, in coordination with what has already been said through Yah to Moses, and Father's tried. The Messiah has tried. And as the husband, and she still just turns away that he's got to issue this. How is he then going to, in the midst of this, at some point in the future, say, yeah, but you are going to be like the sand of the sea, and you're going to be called sons of the living El? How does that get done? Well, here's verse 11. It doesn't end there. It says, in the children of Judah. Now we're talking about the southern kingdom. And the children of Israel, the north scattered, one mixed in the Gentiles, shall be, meaning in the future, gathered together. Hold on a second. What is he saying about the bride again? At some point in the future, this northern house, this one nation that's been scattered amongst the world, with Judah, are going to be brought back together again to be one nation, one bride. This is really important, because really this is the story of the covenants. The marriage shall be brought together as one bride, and appoint for themselves one head over them. Well, what head is over a bride? A husband. One husband will be appointed. Of course, we know this is Mashiach that we're talking about. It always has been, but it will be Mashiach. That's what's being told us here. So even though they're separated, even though they've been divided, even though one's given a decree of divorce, somehow, some way, at the end, they're going to be called the sons of the living God, and they're going to come together again as one over under the head of a husband, and shall come up out of the earth from their scattering from amongst the nations. For great is the day of Yezreel, or the day of scattering. So, all right, yeah, they're divorced, but now we have a little window here saying, wait a minute, in the end, he's going to bring them all back together again. So did Father forget about the marriage covenant he made with them. But then what about the divorce he just made? Because the Torah says you can't bring a woman back if she's rejected and been with someone else, or else you defile the land. You can't have the land defiled. You still have to deal with what we just read in Jeremiah 31, which again comes out of Deuteronomy. Jeremiah 3, not 31, Jeremiah 3, verse 1. Again, it says right there on the bottom, Elohim said, if a man puts away his wife and she goes from him and becomes another man's, does he return to her again? No. What would not the land be made greatly unclean? So there's a problem here. How is what he's telling Hosea to do in the story in chapter 1 of Hosea that we know has already started because the northern kingdom was scattered out? Judah did survive until the Mashiach comes and is still there now in the Middle East. What's the end of this story going to look like? The end of the story is the bride coming back together as one nation. Right now, they're two, but they will be one. But still, we don't get insight into here as to how exactly that's going to happen. Here is Jeremiah chapter 31 and verse 18. Jeremiah says, a couple of different scriptures here, so follow with me. This is the master speaking through Jeremiah. I have clearly heard Ephraim lamenting. Ephraim's been scattered. You have chastised me, and I was chastised, like an untrained calf. Turn me back, and I shall turn back. You are my Yah, my Elohim. Verse 20. Yah says, is Ephraim a precious son to me, a child of delights? For though I spoke against him, I still remembered him. So even in their scatterings, he said, I want to have compassion on you. He still remembered them. Declares Yah. Verse 27. So here's what he says. See, the days are coming in the future to make everything that we just read in Hosea come true. See, the days are coming, declares Yah, that I shall sow, meaning to graft together, to put two things together that were not together. Just like we've talked about before with grape plants and how they would graft them in. And this has everything to do with Romans 12. We just don't have time to get into it for tonight. But he's telling us the days are coming in the future that I shall sow, to graft, the scattered house of Israel of the north and the house of Judah with the seed of man and the seed of beasts, the Gentiles. The time is coming when there's going to be a grafting together of the northern house and the southern house, but not just the northern house and the southern house. With that grafting of the northern house and the southern house is also going to come the grafting in of the nations all together to become one bride. When I shall make, verse 31, see the covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Let me back up a little bit. Verse 31, I'm right here. See, the days are coming, declares Yah, when I shall make a renewed marriage covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. So we would say new covenant, but it's not a new covenant. What is he actually doing? He is renewing how and why and through. We'll talk about in a second. But he's telling us he is going to renew the marriage covenant that he made with his original wife. He's not picking another wife. He's not picking another nation. He's picking this nation. This is the wife. This is the bride. And he's telling us he's going to renew what they broke. He's going to renew and restore them as his bride. When I shall make a renewed covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I strengthened their hand and took them out of the land of Egypt. My marriage covenant, which they broke, though I, Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, Messiah, was a husband to them. So literally, what is he doing? He is remarrying the one he married on Mount Sinai by renewing the wedding covenant with that bride and her descendants, and splitting those that were split, bringing them all back together to make them one. Crazy story. This isn't just about going out and getting the Gentiles. This is about a marriage covenant. The kingdom of Yah is about a father who wants a marriage ceremony for his son, or marriage banquet for his son. That's what this is all about. The whole thing's been about. All right, so how does this get accomplished? Because we still got a problem here. Jeremiah 3:1. And Elohim said, if a man puts away his wife and she goes away from him to another man, does he return to her again? Would that not make the land be greatly unclean? Yes. And there it is. It's Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. You guys can go ahead and look that up yourselves and read it. I'm running out of time here, so you guys go do this. So the question is, how? If he's going to keep the Torah, which obviously the master does when he comes, he's the one that gave it to Moses, but he also keeps it while he's here. How does this get done? Because the northern house is already scattered. The northern house is already not his people. The northern house has already been intermixed and intermingled amongst, for at this point, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before Messiah even gets here, that this has been going on. A long time. So maybe longer than that, but a long time this has been going on. So how is he going to bring them back together? Which this isn't the only place this is found. This is part of Ezekiel when we talk about the two branches, the two nations that are going to come back together. Same story. It's the wedding covenant story. But the question is how? How is that going to be done? Well, Saul gives us the answer in Romans chapter 7. And it's a Torah answer. Everything's Torah, guys. Everything's the instruction that Father gave through the Son to Moses on Mount Sinai. Verse 7, chapter 7. I think it's I don't know like what verse this is. I can't say. I think it's verse 1. It says, "Or do you not know, brothers? For I speak to those knowing the Torah." So he's saying, listen, if you know the Torah, you're going to understand what I'm about to say. So obviously there's Jews in the congregation that he's speaking to. That the Torah rules over a man as long as he lives, meaning the instructions are for our life. Once you die, the Torah, the covenant has no bearing on you. The Torah, the instruction has no bearing on you. The Torah rules over a man for as long as he lives. For the married woman, so now he's talking specifically about marriage. He's referring to Deuteronomy chapter 24. For the married woman has been bound by Torah, meaning the marriage covenant found in the Torah, to the living husband. But if the husband dies, she is released from the original marriage covenant, the Torah, concerning her husband. So Saul's given us a little bit of twist on Deuteronomy 24. He's saying, yeah, sure, if she leaves, she can't come back, right? That's gonna defile the land. She's been with another. She didn't want to reconcile. She made her decision. She can't now just come back. But she's still bound by that original marriage covenant, which makes her an adulteress no matter what she does. But if her husband dies, the husband of the original covenant, it says concerning husband, so then while her husband lives, she shall be called an adulteress if she becomes another man's, just like the northern house, the one scattered amongst the nations and the Gentiles. She became another man's, and she is an adulteress because her husband lived. Yah lived. Messiah lived eternally before he comes here, but he lived. But if her husband dies, she is free from the marriage covenant, that part of the Torah, so that she is not an adulteress having become another man's. So how does Father, in what he says in Hosea, going to make the people who are not his people, who are scattered, who he has no compassion on, how is he going to call them sons of the living El? Well, He's going to forgive them. Well, how can he forgive them? She's a adulterous bride. The husband's going to die, which breaks the marriage covenant, doesn't make her an adulteress anymore, and now she is free to marry another, the first husband, who now raises from the dead. That's crazy. Talk about knowing the Torah, just working all around it and living by its rules, and yet finding a way where there seems to be absolutely no way. This is how he's going to get Jezreel back, and how eventually he's going to put Jezreel, Ephraim, the northern house, who is now scattered and in the seed of all the nations. So this gospel story doesn't just go out, it goes out to Ephraim, but it goes out to the whole world because she's scattered amongst the whole world. And that seed is going to be grafted into the house of Israel through Jezreel, Israel, and be connected to Judah in the end when we pick one husband, or have the one husband over us. That's the story. That is what the marriage covenant is all about. Here's John chapter 11. It says, if we let him alone like this. So this is after the raising of Lazarus. They're plotting his death. So listen to what Caiaphas says. If we let him alone like this, they all shall believe in him. And the Romans shall come and take away from us both our place and nation. They're a separate nation. And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing, neither do you consider that it is better for us that one man die. Let me make this bigger for me. It is better for us that one man die for the people than that the entire nation should perish. But he did not say this from himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yeshua was about to die for the nation. And not for that nation only. He's also going to die for another nation. So now we go back to where we just were in the parable of the vineyard. And he's saying the kingdom of Elohim is going to be taken from you and given to another nation. He's not talking about the Gentiles, a Gentile nation. He's not talking about picking America or Japan or some other. That's not the other nation he's going to give it to. He's going to find the scattered children who are mixed into all of the nations that have an ear to hear and would believe that he is indeed the Son of Elohim and that he died and he rose again. We would be given the authority to, just as Hosea says, become the sons of Elohim. And we will one day be joined back together with Judah, which means there has to be a Judah still here today. And there is. And there is. I prophesied, but to gather together into. So here, let's one more time. It says, and not for that nation only, there's another nation, but to gather together into one, that is to graft together, the children of Elohim who were scattered. Jezreel, the northern house amongst the Gentiles, and graft them back in from abroad. So from that day on, they plotted to kill him. So when this gentleman is telling this woman on the video that, well, they're not the people of God anymore. They're not the chosen ones. They're not the covenant people. That he's picked another nation, meaning the Gentile church. That's not true. That's just not true. That's not the story. The Gentiles have an opportunity to be grafted into this, but we're not some separate entity. We are grafted into this, not them into us. And that's pretty much how the story is told to us, though. So Israel, the northern house, the divorced one, who gets disowned, scattered, mixed among the Gentiles through death, is forgiven and grafted back in. Judah, the adulterous wife, the thief, but not divorced. Yah never divorced her. She was forgiven and renewed, just like the northern house. This is my body, this is my blood, for many, for the renewed covenant, for the forgiveness of sins, to bring the bride together. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in Judah listened, but that doesn't mean everybody in Judah didn't listen either. Many in Judah have listened throughout all of the ages. And now that there are so many there who maybe do not listen now, but many are starting to listen, we're getting there, guys. This is kind of exciting time to live in. We are watching the potential of the two houses coming together, perhaps even in our own lifetimes. Luke chapter 23, verse 34. So I told you, he didn't divorce her. Yeshua on the cross was saying, Father, forgive them. Not divorce them. Forgive them. This blood and his body are the symbols or the emblems of the renewed covenant. Just like Jeremiah said. Renewed with who? The northern house and the southern house and all the seeds of men who could be grafted into them. That's what the new covenant is all about. So we'll leave it right there for tonight. I just wanted to do this as an sort of introduction. I want you to realize what the story is really about. So it's not about some other entity called church today. It's not about another nation, some other Gentile nation called Christianity. That's not what it's about. It's about Ephraim, who's been scattered amongst all of us, and every one of us that have an ear to hear. We're the children that are coming back. Some of us just from the Gentile nations, other of us, who knows where our ancestry comes from, but we have ears to hear. Either way, we are being grafted back in. Because of the era of Judah, salvation has been brought out to everyone. And if the era of Judah has allowed this great renewed covenant to begin to bring Ephraim back into the fold, what's going to happen when Judah actually opens her eyes? Then the two sticks or the two women are going to be grafted together, and they will be one nation on the hills of Israel, in that land back there, and access eventually to the New Jerusalem, to live in the kingdom here, and then to see the New Jerusalem when it comes, and to be in Father's presence after that. That's a wonderful story. A lot different than I think we've heard it most of the time, but there it is from a biblical context. We're going to get more into this. We're going to talk more about the place of Israel today, what's going on, especially what's going on right now all over the world. What are some things prophecy says about that we should be looking for to know where we are? How does this story actually going to play out? Where are we? It's kind of what we've heard in church that, he's going to take away us in a rapture, and then later on he's going to deal with Judah. I think the whole thing is going to get done in one big fell swoop, and he's going to do it all together. And we'll get more into that on Friday. We'll get more into that this upcoming Saturday as well. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I sincerely appreciate it. Like I said, don't forget, if you guys are not subscribed, to do that, hit that button. Give us a thumbs up, a like if you enjoyed this study. Join us on Friday night at 7:30 for Brother Max and I for Hidden Manna. We will be here. If we got to wheelchair ourselves in, we will be here. And I got a neat discussion for you guys. In the meantime, have an awesome rest of the night, everybody. Enjoy, and we'll see you on Shabbat Eve. Shalom, everybody. Peace.